the art scene sometimes on Hornby, there can be like this exclusive group of people who are running things behind the scenes and no one exactly knows how it works. So I would say that that's a bit of a dystopia.
I can't agree more. I think that it's too easy to think about Hornby as a utopia, of course. I really had fun with this one contrast, and Melissa helped me out a lot with it. I don't know, is Melissa still here? I did a literary lunch and for the New Horizons, and I read my little sub-chapter that's all about the exchange that Melissa and I had. She and I discussed this, again, this goes back to this whole, okay, I'm going in circles now. The set of theory is called symbolic interactionism, okay? Fancy word. It was what I was talking about a minute ago when it's like people will say to you that the Barbie doll will make your kid do this or that, right? And the observation is that an object has no meaning in itself. An object only has meaning in the way that we use it, right? So I can take this pen, right? I mean, what can I do with this pen? If I take it like this and leap at somebody, all of a sudden I've got a weapon, right? The point is that this object could be anything. I'm doodling on my face and I'm all freaked out, or or writing something down, or it's mightier than the sword, right? Well, there was a great session comparing the Hall and Joe King. And how is it that Joe King, which to an outsider like myself does not appear as far as a space, I mean, the walls are kind of white, the architecture is not all that far off, right? There's a cool funky steel beam, right? I mean, and somehow, and we know the somehow, but aside from the somehow, there's nothing inherent about the structures that we have. They collect this ooze, this soup that I was talking about, the repetitive experience. They collect meaning. And so Joe King somehow becomes the dive, right? Because maybe Hornby needs a dive. And that's part of getting at your question. I think you asked something more complicated than that. But what I first wanted to say is that the art scene on Hornby is very heterogeneous. There are many kinds of arts happening in many places, and with a whole bunch of artists who think they know best, what the real art is, you're going to run into troubles. And there's a lovely of course I've got the more music end of things, so I really can't speak to a lot of the other arts that are happening on the island. I'm beginning to get involved in Hayek, and I'm excited about what they may be, but I don't really know. I know that there used to be a performing arts set of folk. I don't know what happened to that, right? There's a lovely chunk in the dissertation, I think it's probably, where I was able to kind of retell the history of the Hornby Island Festival, and it was a fun story in the dissertation because I was able to show like what an incredible balancing act Deirdre does, because there are people with some very strong ideas about what it should, what it shouldn't be, and it is like you're in all directions at once. And what was fun, and it was funny because Deirdre wasn't there, but I went to this AGM and everybody was just amazed that she had been able to like keep the wolves at bay. And so, I mean, I think that the first step maybe to confronting that is just being open and talking about it. And being like, okay, we've got an art scene, and how do we make sure that everybody feels included? And how can we be confident in knowing that when people are included, the art scene will be better? And then really, I mean, Hornby is an aesthetic island. And I wrote this into a grant thing, so forgive me, Dan, you probably had to read it back there, but for Heisey. But Hornby is a place of aesthetics. There's natural aesthetics. People come for the natural aesthetics, and people come for the cultural aesthetics. People will always be coming for the natural aesthetics, but if we don't upkeep the cultural aesthetics, all those other sectors of our society are going to fall apart. I mean, I feel like, well, it's your show, of course it's your show. But I fundamentally believe that the businesses will fail. I mean, aside from the businesses that again are perhaps, or they're going to have to shift to being like, well, sorry, we don't have any culture, but hey, you can X, Y, and Z, right? Because the market's going to change. All these, I don't mean the market, I mean literally the market around the corner is going to change, where we won't be able to have this interweaving of art into everything. Which doesn't mean, I'm not saying that that needs to become what we invest in as a community, but it means that we need to have that, like, keep the eye on the prize. And I don't know, I mean, it's troubling too, right? I think when we start to talk about what's going to make Hornby thrive, then we get into the conversation of like when and how many tourists, and do we even want tourism and all that stuff, right? So it's really complicated. But I appreciate that you're asking the question, and I think that people should. It's easy for me. It's easy for me because I'm new, and I know that I'm gonna step on somebody's toes, and it's just part of it. Yeah. I just try to remind myself that I had people on my committee who were ready to destroy my entire career about this art stuff, whether and nobody else is gonna scare me in the same way. They were super supportive, but hey, they didn't like what I had done. Sorry, Tom.
Just going back to, is it on? Yes. The idea of culture, the counterculture, and somebody who's kind of interfaces with a lot of visitors in the parks, and a lot of people come and they have this idea, this concept of Hornby, and realize that social diversity is important as ecological diversity. And people appreciate the difference about Hornby, and even though they're not part of our community, the fact that a place like this exists is important to them because it's providing, alternative concepts and ways of being. And I think it's really important not just for us, but for everybody who faces with our island to kind of keep that alive. And I see it happening in two ways. One is the continuity. I mean, it just warms my heart seeing people that I see born or grow up here, now having their families and having their kids and having that continuity because they know in their bones what Hornby's all about. And also being able to welcome people that come here and are looking for what we have to offer. And I really feel like the last 2 or 3 years there's almost a critical mass of energy taking this back to the place, going to potlucks where there's kids running around, like in the hall. That's what the island was like when I came here. And people getting together and playing music. And I'm feeling this beginning of bringing that energy back. We need to nurture it. And it's much harder for people now who are looking for the lifestyles that people came here 30, 40 years ago, in terms of getting property, getting land, the cost of living and so on. And I think those of us that hold and value this really need to provide every bit of support, emotional, but every way we can to younger people. And things that have just really inspired me in terms of what, is stuff like Brea's doing, with the maypole thing, and then the summer dance at and the bar dance after the fall fair, and things like that, where people come together of all ages in our split island spaces, and being together and showing music and dance, and I'm really feeling that the energy that drew me and kept me here when I first came is starting to come back again. So I'm feeling hopeful, but it's going to take a lot of commitment from all our parts to provide, the support that's required to keep it going.
Well, if I have to say and respond, but yes. Should we call it adjourned? Thank you all so much for coming. You know how it is on Hornby, there's always a process. I'm going to have to clean up. I would love a few people or some folks to help with the chairs, because I don't know even where everything goes. It's part of the problem. So I'm going to have to pull up my sheet to make sure I do all the things on the sheet. Yeah, can't thank you all enough. Have a great night. Get home safe.